Every day he held court at the palace. Rich or poor, tall or short, man or woman, anyone could walk in with a problem. The king would always find a way to solve it. The king lived with his wife and son in a red stone palace. Prince Vera was 10 years old. But he didn't go to school. The school came to him. His teachers lived in a palace and taught him mathematics, science, economics, and many languages, including Persian, Mandarin, and Latin. The prince had to master archery, horseback riding, and swimming. Sons of ministers and students with special scholarships came to the palace to study with him. If anyone could compete with Prince Vera, it was Suku, the farmer's son. Suku had won a scholarship to visit with the prince. He was a good match for Vera and could best him in wrestling and fencing. He rode horses as well as Vera, too. The two boys became good friends. They ate together, studied together, and played in the courtyard together. When they were let out early from classes, the boys liked to hide behind the large golden curtains and peep into the king's court. It was always filled with people who had problems. 3 days after the harvest, Suku came to the palace to see Prince Vera. He brought fresh corn, bunches of ground nuts, and tender coconut water to drink. "Do you want to go to the woods?" Prince Vera asked. "We can check on mongoose holes for snakes and chase deer and bison. After a week of harvest, I don't want to be anywhere near plants and trees," said Suku. "Can we sneak into the court and see what's going on?" "Let's go to the queen's chambers," said Vera. "We can watch the court through the small windows." The boys scampered through the rooms, jumping onto ornate chests. The thick carpets hid the sound of their hurrying feet. Whenever a guard appeared, they hid behind a large carved doors. As soon as they reached the queen's chamber, Vera peeked in to see if any of his mother's maids were there with the flowers and perfumes the queen needed for her bath. Seeing no one, the boys went through the recreation room and into the viewing gallery. The long, thin corridor overlooked the court. Alongside the windows, a bench was set up for the queen to sit on and to listen. The round windows were decorated with carvings of peacocks and elephants. They glistened, reflecting the sparkle of gemstones. "This is a great place to spy," said Prince Vera. "You can see and hear everything that happens." "Shh," Suku whispered. "Spies don't chatter." Before Vera could reply, a horn blared. He and Suku kneeled on the cushioned benches and peeped through the windows. To the beat of drums, King Bhima entered through the large doors. 2 soldiers walked in front of him. A long train of maroon silk stretched from the king's tunic. "What if the sentry steps on it?" Prince Vera asked. "I'll die laughing," said Suku. "I'm sure you will die if you laugh," said Prince Vera. "Want to try?" "Shh, stop talking," said Suku. From below, they heard the king say, "Let the proceedings begin." Then King Bhima sat down on his throne. A man stepped to the center of the court and gave his name. He asked the king to do something about the crows that dirtied his newly built terrace. As people presented their problems, the king sometimes asked them to come back later with more details or to bring a witness. Sometimes he gave them work, sometimes he gave them money. 1 or 2 even got punished for wasting his time. Some of the problems were serious. One man was there about his sick parents. A woman came to complain about her greedy landlord. Some people had silly problems, like the man who had lost his shadow. Another wanted to charge rent to the birds that sat on his roof. A woman came to complain that the roadside tree gave more shade to her neighbor's house than to her own. "That's ridiculous," said Suku, when a man asked if he could live inside his neighbor's chimney. "I'm sure we could solve these problems," said Vera. "And who's going to let us?" said Suku. That evening, the boys didn't play in the woods or swim in the river. They played court instead. Prince Vera met imaginary people and heard their cases. Suku was his counsel. A week had gone by. There were no classes on New Moon Day. With nothing to do, the boys crept into the palace to watch King Bhima hold court. But this time the court was empty, and outside there was a long line of people waiting to see the king. "Where is your father?" Suku asked. Veera and Suku raced to the king's chamber. "The king is unwell," said the royal physician. "Don't bother him." Veera looked at his father's pale face. His mother, the queen, sat close by, tending to him. "But people are waiting," Veera whispered to Suku. "Maybe we should open our own court," Suku whispered back. Veera's eyes twinkled. This is the perfect opportunity. He leaned toward his father's bed. "Father, I can hold court today on your behalf," he said. "What?" the king sputtered, trying to sit up. "We have been listening to your court for many days," admitted Veera. "We're sure that we can handle it." "Are you trying to become king?" asked the king, smiling. "No, father, but I will learn to govern," said Veera, "and you can get some rest." "Well, that sounds very tempting," the king said, "but you can't do this on your own. Here, I present to you my wise counsel." "Suku," said Veera. The king smiled at both of them. "You've been planning this for a long time, then," he said. "Very well, I'll give you the chance. But you can hear only simple cases and only in the courtyard, not in my court." "Anything you say, father," Veera said, unable to hide his smile. A court was quickly set up in the courtyard. Prince Veera's chair was placed in the middle, and a chair for Suku was placed to its right. 4 sentries stood by, guarding the courtyard as people formed a line. Some people were alone, some had brought their friends, some were empty-handed, some held chickens or eggs, and one even held a bucket of biryani. A sentry announced the arrival of the prince. A loud gasp arose from the people. "Where is the king?" many of them cried. "Let's hear the first case," said the prince, sitting down. A man who smelled of hay stepped forward and bowed to the prince. "Your Highness," he began, "my neighbor follows my cow around all town and picks up the cow dung. I want you to forbid him to do that. The cow drops belong to me." Veera thought about it for a moment and said, "From today, why don't you tie a dung bag behind the cow? Then you can collect the droppings for yourself." "Next case," said Suku. "Dear Prince," said the next man who stepped forward, "it's my neighbor. I want her to stop singing." "Is she awful?" said Veera. "She is the best singer in the city, Your Highness," he explained. "I just sit next to the window all day and listen. I missed work most days." Veera and Suku huddled and discussed the case. "From today onward, you have to keep your window shut until you come back from work," Veera ordered. "Who is next?" asked Suku. Two men stepped forward. One was dressed in cotton and the other in silk. The first man stood with his arms folded. The second man leaned on his wooden cane and stroked his mustache. "State your case," said Prince Veera. "With due respect, dear Prince, I think this problem is too tricky for you," said the second man. "If I decide the problem is too big for me, the king will surely talk to you tomorrow," said the prince. "Today you must place your trust in me." "My name is Mitaman," said the second man. "I have a small sweet shop in the market. I make all the sweets myself, and I use only pure butter and sugar." "This is the prince's course. Don't waste our time talking about your sweet shop," said Suku. "I really like sweets," said the prince. "I want to hear more." "Your Majesty, we make laddas, jabalis, and kheer and sonpapati. And we make all sorts of sweets. We are famous all over the kingdom." "Have you brought any sweets with you?" asked the prince. Metaram turned and gestured toward someone. Another man entered and handed Metaram a large plate covered by a checkered cloth. The smell of sugar and butter wafted over the court. The people closed their eyes and enjoyed the smell. "Very nice," said the prince. "It smells very nice." He leaned forward to take a sweet. Suku shook his head ever so slightly. Veera sat back in his chair, frowning at Suku. Don't smell it, Your Majesty, said the other man. That's exactly the problem. Take the sweets to my room, Vera said. A sentry took the plate from Maître Ram. Your Majesty, said Maître Ram, this man, Copy, stood several minutes outside my shop smelling my sweets, but he left without buying or paying. If he didn't buy, why must he pay? Asked Vera. Because he enjoyed the smell so much. It takes a lot of butter and sugar to get that smell, Your Majesty. That smell attracts many customers into the shop. If they all came just to smell my sweets and never to buy any, I wouldn't make any money. Interesting, said the prince. This man Copy should pay 5 silver coins for enjoying the sweet smells of my shop. You have to be fair, Prince. Vera, just like your father. Prince Vera closed his eyes. He could almost touch the wafting fragrance of the sweet. It made him slightly hungry. Copy, what do you say for yourself? Copy was not richly dressed as Maître Ram. He was thin and didn't wear any jewelry. His white shirt was almost brown, and his dhoti was patched in many places. My dear Prince, I'm a poor man, Copy began. I work very hard in the fields. Once a month, I come to town to buy groceries. I have only 5 silver coins. Walking through the market, I smelled the sweets. I stopped for a few minutes, taking in the wonderful smells, but the sweets were too expensive. I couldn't afford to buy rice, vegetables, and sweets with the money that I had. What did you do then? Asked the prince. He didn't realize that people had to choose between vegetables and sweets. He was surprised that Copy decided to buy vegetables instead of sweets. I definitely choose the sweets, he thought. My children need food, Your Majesty. They go to school and they need to eat well. The sweets would last for just a day, but the rice and vegetables will last all month. So I decided not to buy the sweets. But you enjoyed the smell, the prince asked. Yes, I did. Somehow the smell itself was enough. It felt like eating the sweets. That's exactly my case, Your Majesty, piped in Maître Ram. Shh, Suku hushed the man. The prince closed his eyes. He tried not to think about the sweets, just the problem in front of him. What would his father do? Okay, I've decided, said Prince Viri. Copy, give your 5 silver coins to Maître Ram. Copy's face fell. With tears in his eyes, he handed over the money. Maître Ram's face lit up with joy. He counted the 5 silver coins at least 5 times. The prince watched this in silence. Thank you, dear prince. You are very fair and just, said Maître Ram. I'll take my leave now. Not so fast, my man. Now please return the 5 silver to Copy. But, well, he smelled your sweets, but he didn't eat them. Yes, but, and you held the money in your hands, didn't you? Yes, but, and you counted it, and you imagined adding it to your money box. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Yes, but, he enjoyed the smell of the sweets, and you enjoyed the feel of the money. A fair exchange, don't you think? Maître Ram hung his head in shame. From now on, treat your customers fairly, Prince Vera cautioned. Always make some sweets for the people who cannot afford to buy the expensive ones. Maître Ram returned the money and left the court. Bring the plate of sweets to my room, said the prince. Take those to your children, Copy. Let them eat rice, vegetables, and sweets today. Copy left the court smiling and carrying a large basket filled with sweets. That night during dinner, Prince Vera ate all his vegetables, even his peas.